Howdy folks, welcome to another edition of the Scannell Agenda. My name is Stephen J.F. Scannell, and the title of today's show is Codium. This is show number 93. Today's date is November 2nd, 2018. I brought some Codium with me. I have it in a little bag here. And I was down Red River Beach the other day. You know, I've kept an eye on Red River Beach pretty much all my life. Off and on, you go down there and check it out. I see very little eelgrass now, and I'm kind of worried. Very few scallops as well. I think Codium has basically taken over the show down there in the water. And, you know, the scallops were trying to get a little foothold there years ago. When I was, let's say, a kid in high school, we used to have scallops that would wash up. Some people would go down and get them, like scallop seed would wash up, and there was a little chance that the scallops and the eelgrass were going to get a foothold there. And for some reason, I think the Codium and the eelgrass are natural competitors. I know from many years of bay scalloping on Nantucket that we kind of consider that the Codium is kind of like a weed, like a dandelion. And if it gets into an eelgrass bed, it doesn't help the grass. It's very heavy stuff. Here is a nice knobby conch with some slipper shell on it. Now this was brought inshore, washed in, and so it gives you an idea of that the Codium has such a tooth on the water, it grabs the water, and see, this is what really startles me. This is a bay scallop shell. And I believe, looking at this shell, I think it's fairly recently dead. In other words, the past 2 months or so. It's an okay looking scallop, but I saw very few scallops down there. And, you know, that is a lot for a scallop to contend with, having this growing on it. And there's so much Codium in the water column that is going to get right into everything. And the Codium will grow on anything. This is probably about 5 pounds between the rock and the Codium here. And this rock, of course, blew in and washed way up ashore, carried in with the Codium. So the Codium carries with it what it grows on. And it's usually a little slipper shell. You know, it can be a scallop shell, the boat shell. There's another scallop with the Codium on it. Basically same thing. And I've noticed over the years that the scallops were stunted. I've mentioned that on the show. That is genetically the broad stock that you want to have. Just wasn't materializing there at Red River. It was genetically stunted. So this is a sea scallop, and I can remember years ago when I was in high school, and Tom Leach, the harbor master, had these guys out there shucking their sea scallops in certain places, and to create a bit of a natural reef, and that was a good idea. And you see these sea scallops come in quite a bit because of that. So the Codium can be eaten. There is a recipe for Codium soup. I've eaten a few pieces. I just don't like it. It's just not palatable. But I do eat sea greens. I'm not going to call it seaweed anymore. These are sea greens now that they're being marketed, and certain people would like to change the name from the un-PC seaweed to sea greens, which I'm usually opposed to that kind of thing, but I thought that made sense. I thought we could mix the Codium with some kind of hog feed, mix it with alfalfa or hay or whatever we're slopping the hogs with, and then get that going over the bridge as a product, and even subsidize it to go over the bridge and get rid of it that way. It seems to me if you can find a use for the codium, that would be good. We could just pile it and let it rot, but it doesn't even make great fertilizer from what I understand. Well, I've never gone to get any, but we used to get truckloads of the eelgrass, and that did make pretty good soil composition additive, let's say. So I think that's a real key. In some places you can vacuum it up off the bottom, it would seem, or you can harvest it. I could probably harvest myself if I were a diver. I haven't dove in years and years, but if I were down there picking it or dredging it up with scallop dredges, I could probably get 4 or 5 truckloads in a day, if I had a good system of putting it up on deck and putting it in boxes and getting the boxes loaded onto a truck with a conveyor belt. I could probably do 4 or 5 truckloads. Moderate trucks, maybe 2 or 3 of the big tractor-trailer trucks. But the problem is you'd have to kind of have a line, because I think you'd have to disattach the codium from the, maybe a machine could do this, from the shells and rocks that it grows on. Now, if we could just start doing this on a very small scale and get some kind of a subsidized program to do this with, Amherst and the farm colleges in the region, that would be really good. So if you know of anybody that wants to get into eelgrass, I'm kind of a crazy nut about the eelgrass. I want to do this eelgrass thing because I think it means millions and millions of dollars for our region, New England. Millions in income, particularly from the bay scallops, but there's a lot more than that too. Now, on Nantucket, when I fished for scallops, we didn't really catch too many bay scallops in with the codium. So it's really not great habitat for the codium, but the scallops will take and they will grow there marginally. The real habitat for the bay scallop is the eelgrass. Now, the scallop will filter the water and then produce a dung, feces and pseudo-feces, because it doesn't eat everything. It passes it bundles it and passes it through whatever and deposits it. And now if you have healthy eelgrass, what happens is the eelgrass is enriched by the shellfish, fish or what have you, especially the scallops, because they're in such great tonnage on the grassy bottom, and they're filtering and producing this stuff. So it's a real symbiotic relationship between the eelgrass and the scallops. But with the codium, it's like a foreign weed. I believe it's from Japan. I'm not sure. But it's a hell of a problem, I think, that we're not getting into. Now, from one perspective, from a tourist perspective, this summer at Red River Beach, there was a lot of complaints, and there was some hot days, and in the beach area was really nasty for a couple of days there because of the heat and some stuff washed on shore. I really haven't seen much eelgrass on the shores there. And years ago, you'd see a lot. And you would see a little bit of codium here and there. But the codium, like I said, it has taken over. And I think if you planted eelgrass, it would be a waste of time out there, because you'd have to, I don't know what's overpowering the eelgrass, but the eelgrass has been overpowered. I don't know if it's the set of codium on the blades and it scums up the blades of eelgrass, or it may be that in conjunction with other things. I'm really not sure. But I have a feeling that the Codium is going to ruin our dreams for a bay scallop fishery out there. The other thing, as I've mentioned, that you do need is a broad stock of scallops. We've got zilch, as far as I can see, for scallops out there, just by what has been coming in, washing up, from what I see. I've seen a couple boats out there. Looks like they were trying around, and I don't think there's much out there. Whereas if we played our cards right, in short order, we could have, like I said, about a $30 million scallop fishery between Yarmouth and Dennis and Harwich. All those grounds between Bass River, Lewis Bay, Dogfish Bar to Red River Beach. We could have probably about a $30 million fishery in conjunction with a lucrative eelgrass sod farm, and that could be done inshore and offshore. There's money in all this stuff, but we just tend to sit around and look at each other. And I think it's been really a bad practice over the years for the public to look to fishermen, and the fishermen are somehow going to give the answers. I may be the exception to that rule, in that I get into this public resource management area or areas of the fisheries. So my point with the Codium is we need to get together and start moving this stuff over the bridge, start putting it to use, I believe, as an animal feed. I don't know what could eat it. I don't even know. Could chickens eat some of this stuff? It's got a certain amount of salt in it. It keeps, and it's valuable in that respect because it won't really rot that quick and stink. I can't even, I'm sitting next to it, and it really doesn't stink a lot. It's spongy. It's very spongy. And it retains its weight. This has been sitting around the car for a couple of days. It is very heavy. It's very green, so maybe there's some nutrients in there, but the eelgrass isn't nutritious to eat, but the brant eat the epiphytes, I think, off of the eelgrass. And there's certain slimes and things that, the brown algae in it grows on the eelgrass, and that's edible for birds, etc. I don't know what eats the Codium. Now, together with the Codium, you've got this thing here. I'll rip it off of here. Doesn't come off easy. This is the slipper shell, the boat shell. And they're all over the place. So maybe there's a use for those, but those are not indigenous, in case you didn't know that. And those are a problem too, but those are edible, and I've eaten them. I've almost made a good meal out of it. They're called sweetmeats on Nantucket. Some of the fishermen eat them on Nantucket and cook them with rice. And it's not like eating periwinkles. You get a little more, and you just pick them out. And they're pretty good, actually. But that problem, in conjunction with the Codium, might be handled by harvesting and bounties and subsidizing some of these things. And then in conjunction with that, of course, your eelgrass planting. And it could be done, that we could have a really lucrative fishery. But this is one of the obstacles in the way. And like I said, I've been going to Red River Beach now for many years. And a lot of years, I guess. I passed by a hedge and I said, I've been studying that hedge for 52 years. I pulled that out of my hat because I'm 61 years old, I guess. So as a kid, I saw this a hornbeam tree growing in the hedge, and it was trimmed off every year. And now that stump, it was at the old Anderson house on the corner of Gorham Road and Hoyt Road. There's a hedge there with several different things growing. But that stump has been, that tree's been growing in there for many years, this hornbeam tree. And I was just saying to somebody right here at the studio yesterday, I was explaining to somebody that there's about 10 or 11 of these hornbeam trees that grow right outside the studio. And they were used, according to Louis Pina, he told me this, as ship's rollers, because this wood is very hard. In fact, it may be the hardest wood in the country. And it was used for rolling the ships into the water. That's how hard it was. Oak wasn't hard enough. And very dense, very hard wood, the hornbeam, or tupelo, as it's called. But we've got them out here, right outside the studio. If you go outside the door, you're looking at them. They're a beautiful tree, one of my favorites. But so, in conjunction with that hedge that I mentioned there, now I've been studying, you might say, Red River Beach all my life, because that was my beach as a kid. And it's just nothing like it used to be. It's not as healthy. All this Codium has gotten in there. So I'd love to head that project up. You start small with a project, and you get people involved, and you share the information, and pretty soon, if you could see the chickens eating this stuff, or the hogs, and you mix it in with the feed, or goats, or what have you, you mix it in with cattle feed, somehow this stuff, I'm sure, is edible, because there are recipes for Codium soup. It's an edible seaweed or sea green. It may make us a lot of money. We could be lamenting the fact that we're all out of it one of these days, but then we'd have scallops, I think. Anyway, the the thing of it is, it's hard to get fishermen. You got to have the whole, what's that? It takes a village, you have to have the whole community working on these things. And it's not fair to point to the fishermen and say, what are the fishermen, aren't they going to handle all this stuff? It's kind of complex. But you can have good foundations, and that would be the market quota system of fishery management, or the sea farm, or as I also call it, a pick your own strawberries public resource management system. So these are the foundations that would really click with bringing back the bay scallop fishery. And putting the Codium to use would be a big part of that. I was designing a little floating marine lab. It was reported that I was in favor of having a floating marine lab in Saquatucket Harbor. And I said, whoa, wait a minute, I didn't say that. And then I thought about it, and I said, hey, that'd make a lot of sense. I was designing all these big floating marine labs, and then I started designing tiny ones and small ones and medium-sized ones. Because when I ran for selectman, I think they reported that I wanted a floating marine lab in Saquatucket. That makes sense. I didn't say it, but it does make more sense than some of the stuff I come up with, I'm sure. Now, as I have it, the floating marine lab, here it is, little drawing, one of my drawings. I'm going to get it together one of these days, get this stuff scanned so I can push the buttons and we can all look at this stuff. But this is a 23-foot Steigercraft, repurposed. It's just a design. I didn't do this. But it's got it's got 6 microscopes with a big monitor that scientists can use, and children and teenagers and college students can use to look at everything under the sun that's in the ocean or not in the ocean. But you have a spot for a teacher, you have these 6 microscopes, and then you have seats for 7 kids, and then you have a little galley, you have a head way up forward, and then out here I've got a dock built onto that with 7 seats. So it's 7 kids 7 kids plus 6 kids and the teacher, that's 7. That's a total of 21. Not just on the boat, but on the boat and on this little trailer. And the boat would just simply sit there tied up, and the kids would go down and go use the microscopes. And let's say me or someone like me that works at a marine laboratory, I used to do this at the Nantucket Elementary School. I'd come in and dredge up a bunch of stuff for the little kids. I was the assistant to Joe Grachowski. He was the head of the marine laboratory there, and then that whole thing fizzled. So he went over to the school. What a shame. And I was his assistant over there, and I would have the kids at the touch tank quite often, and they'd say, "What's this?" Or I'd say, "What's this?" And then I'd say, "Well, what is it? What does it eat? What eats it? And what is it we use it for, if anything? And what's it called?" And I'd say, "Does anyone know the Latin name?" Me neither, All these things have a Latin name. But that's a little beyond the kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade level. But now here's a place to start, this little floating marine laboratory at the Saquatucket Harbor. Get the kids down there. And anyone else that needs to use the microscope. Now there are some stories I can tell about good sets of scallops, but one story that came from the vineyard is that there are certain things you can do to get a good set of scallops, and that is inoculate the area with fresh water. And that has a way of killing things off and then kind of paving the way for a charge of spat to really take and have a banner year. And there are all kinds of little things that that can be done to increase the natural sets. Because when you inoculate with the water, or maybe I should use another word, when you treat a saltwater area with the fresh water, you're killing crabs and so forth. And then when you bring, I don't want to get into that. Okay. So I'm going to shift gears here, talk about something. This foundation of a system for moving ahead is what we need. And I can't reiterate that enough. We really need a foundation for moving ahead, which is my system. Call it the Sea Farm system. It's not something fishermen like, but boy, I really don't care if fishermen like it. I mean, how much do you care that fishermen like? If something works, doesn't that mean you like it? All right, this is just agricultural economics, this sea farm thing. So if you like agricultural economics and you want to apply that to the ocean and get some production people involved, let's say I did a show on different management people that could be running the fisheries, and that would be a Congress. I call it a Congress of Marine Scientists and Technicians. So that would be the thing, to have the right people doing the kind of work that they can do. Years ago on Nantucket, I had a lot of ideas. There was a head of a harbor pipeline idea, which wasn't my idea, because we could see the harbor going south, and some of us wanted to put in a pipeline to bring in clean, cool water from the ocean right over the haul over at the head of the harbor on Nantucket. You'd pipe in some water, let's say for the months of maybe part of July and August, and get some good water in there. And then eelgrass, some of the fishermen thought that was nuts. Eelgrass, cut it out. What are you doing? What's this all about, eelgrass? Some fishermen, honest to God, they had no idea. Eelgrass, thought it was like, are you kidding me? You know, talk about scallops, okay, but not eelgrass. That stuff's a pain in the neck. It just gets in the way. And I had an initiative out there to get a bunch of, to work with the state and with the federal government to use some of our stock, being that it was good, broad stock, to help out a place such as Red River Beach that I just talked about, that was trying to get going and it couldn't make it. The scallops weren't able to get going because they were too narrow. It's a genetic thing. And they weren't making it. But if you introduced a charge of all this Nantucket scallops, then the chances are, if you played your cards right, you could get it to work and you could build a fishery. Chatham helped out Nantucket. Nantucket was totally out of scallops many years ago after the wasting disease. I was told totally, there were none. They brought some over from Chatham. So it's kind of an old fisherman type thing. The new fishermen can be almost violent. See, I had pulled the board, explained it to some of the old timers on the board. I was on the board at the time I proposed this, that we get into this and do this. And the old timers were on board right away, you know, help out your neighbor. And then some of the younger guys on the board, one in particular, was, as I say, almost anti-sharing and helping others that it was almost violent, you know. So the thing of it is, there just is just a vacuum of leadership. And so we need to help out with the Codium, we need to help out with the eelgrass and the scallops, and you can't look to fishermen to do this. You've got to look to other avenues. And maybe I'm the exception because I was a fisherman for so many years, you know. So that's it for the Scannell agenda. Thank you very much.